So good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining in this evening. Am I audible? Hope I'm audible. Just you can just type in the chat if I'm audible. Thank you. Thanks. So welcome to our event, Shaping Global Citizens. This is a series of events which we are conducting for study abroad aspirants to interact with global leaders, professors, industry experts to seek guidance and clarity. In addition to doing your studies, it is very important to practice discipline and follow effective routines and way of studying. So today we have Mr. John Williams. He is the owner and co-founder of Study Spot Education Services. Over the past 15 years, John has worked directly and indirectly with hundreds of adolescent students and their families. While John is a great hockey player too, so he has adapted a traditional model of athletic success and applied to the academic success, a model that focuses on an interplay between natural ability, effort, and skill development. So here I welcome John over here. John, it's a pleasure that you are here with us. So now I hand it over to you. Up to you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and having the opportunity to speak to everyone this evening. Today, I want to speak to you about academic coaching. And as was mentioned, this is I've been providing academic coaching support here in Toronto, Canada, for 15 plus years, working with adolescent students, middle school, high school students, predominantly, who are struggling and wanting to provide them with some support that's going to be long-term and lasting. So today, my topic is, first of all, as much as this is a service that we've been providing for some time, we're still trying to introduce it and help students, parents understand what academic coaching is, and perhaps wanting to find out if this is the right kind of support for your son or daughter. So today we are going to answer a few questions. First off, we'll discuss who needs an academic coach? What kind of students are the ones that would benefit most from what we do? And then what is academic coaching? How does it differ from tutoring? And how do I know when signing up for an academic coach or getting an academic coach is going to be appropriate? And then I want to talk a little bit about the relationship of an academic coach and the value it brings to giving the student what they need to be successful, empowering students so that they are not only going to be successful today, but throughout their academic career. So who needs an academic coach? So I've got a list here, quite a long list it looks, of what are considered the more typical referrals that we get for our services. As we go through this list, you might start to recognize the students we're discussing here, as I'm sure that we're all familiar with some of these characteristics. So when trying to decide, if my son or daughter needs some help, what is it they need help with? Where is the breakdown taking place? So does your child leave homework until the last minute? Are they physically disorganized? Are their backpacks in disarray, their binders, loose paper everywhere? They got a messy room. Are they physically disorganized? Do they struggle to get large assignments finished on time? Is it they're not starting soon enough, or they don't know how to start, or for whatever reason, they're always doing things in the last minute to get things done, or are consistently late? Does your child, son or daughter, often feel overwhelmed by school? Do they struggle to understand text and articles, reading from a textbook? Are they able to get the information out of it that they need? Do they struggle to get their thoughts on paper? This is probably one of the most common referral concerns we get, is the student understands a lot. They're able to articulate their mind when they speak, but what comes out on paper is not a reflection of what they're thinking. And unfortunately, school, even with all the technology, students are evaluated primarily on what they're able to put on paper. And those who struggle to get their thoughts onto paper are at a big disadvantage. Does your son or daughter, they get anxious before tests and exams? That's often a sign of the lack of preparation, and perhaps in need of some support. And then when they do write these tests and exams, are they surprised by the results? Do they come out thinking, oh, I did great, and actually they end up doing poorly? Or when they come out and say, no, I don't think I did very well, but end up doing quite well? Either way, that disconnect between what they thought they would do and what they actually did is very much a good sign that there's something amiss, and that there's probably a lack of skills in there that need to be addressed. And overall, and you certainly see this all the time, is that if your child, or you see it, or your son or daughter's been told that they should be doing far better than what their marks are reflective of. If there is a gap between what your son or daughter is capable of and what they're actually generating, that's often a sign of a student who would benefit from academic coaching. You'll notice in this list here, I haven't written down, not very good at math or struggles with science, because those really, when you get to middle school and high school, aren't really where the breakdowns for most students take place. This list here would be reflective of when students struggle, usually what the issues are. So what is academic coaching? Well, academic coaching is one-on-one academic support, a coach and a student working together. The philosophy of Study Spot has always been that when students get to high school and they underachieve, the issues are not subject related. They're not content related. They're usually due to them being ineffective students. They are not able to, they don't know how to learn effectively. And so we provide them with a coach or a mentor, if you will, to work one-on-one with them to show them how to be more effective students. And through this mentorship relationship, we can hopefully open that student's mind to doing things differently. We have an advantage as a coach, is that we're not mom and dad, we're not a teacher. In the eyes of an adolescent, a coach might have some, what we call street credibility. They may be more open to listen to that person and to take advice from them. And there's nothing magical when we're talking about academic coaching, nothing magical to what we are working on. These are really just introducing and practicing what would be considered the best practices of a good student. These skills will certainly be helpful to the student in the short term, but what we're really doing is developing these skills for those students who intend to pursue post-secondary education, whether it be college or university, where these skills are going to be obviously of paramount importance. So what are these skills? So we're not focused on content, we're focused on the development of skills. And these skills fall into two categories. The first category is executive skills. So executive skills relates to executive functioning. The executive skills are organization, physical organization, mental organization, time management, planning. It's how the student functions day to day. Do they have a routine? Do they have a regular workspace? Do they know how to plan for a project? Do they know how to plan a week ahead? Do they know how to create a to-do list? Do they know how to be productive? All of these skills here, they're not just obviously academic skills, these are life skills, and thus they're referred to as these executive skills. And these develop throughout a young person's life into adulthood. But it's during these adolescent years that these skills become the most important. And for some students, they're a little delayed in developing these skills. It's not that they won't develop them, it's just that if they develop them earlier, it certainly would be better. But we're able to help them, provide them with this foundation, the structure, and the habits, the strategies, all of which can help them become more organized. And then, of course, once they're organized and they're doing the schoolwork, they need to develop academic skills. And so here we're looking at reading comprehension, not knowing how to read, but knowing how to identify what's important and what's not important when they read. Differentiating between main ideas and supporting details. Can they go into a textbook and clearly and easily find the main information and then take that main information and put it onto paper in the form of notes and note-taking? And so note-taking is a skill which we need to begin to introduce, as there's various ways in which to record information and keep track of information that's going to help students both understand information, what they're learning, and be able to remember what they're learning. And then, as I referred to before, writing skills, getting their thoughts onto paper, whether that be in the form of essays or projects or even just notes. Being able to communicate what's going on in their mind clearly and concisely so someone else can understand it is of growing importance as they go through school. More so in high school than in elementary, but certainly a great deal more when it comes to university. And as I mentioned, it's an area that many of our students struggle with because there's such a disproportionate amount of weight placed upon what a student produces on paper. And if that's a weakness for a student, it's going to disproportionately affect their ability to score well. And then, of course, test and exam preparation. And as you go through school, tests and exams become greater and greater importance. Many students that we work with, and I may be describing many of your sons or daughters, are very bright. And they've done very well in elementary school. And mostly because they're bright, not because of anything that they're doing specifically. And they've gotten by on their natural abilities. Well, over time, they're less and less capable of doing that. And school tests and exams become bigger, they become more difficult, and their ability just to remember stuff or just to listen and kind of figure things out is not going to be good enough for them to be able to score well on a test and exam. They're going to have to learn how to study. And many students don't know how to study. They study very passively. They read and reread information as opposed to actively learning, where they test and retest themselves. They manipulate information. They're involved in the whole process of learning. And so this transition from taking students from being passive learners into being active learners is a real big component of the academic coaching focus for our students. And you'll notice these skills that are listed here, very few of them are actually built into the curriculum. You might get a little bit of this or a little bit of organization in middle school. You might get a little bit of writing in literature course, perhaps in early high school, but very little time is spent on this. In school, they're taught stuff. And what we know that students should be developing during these years is how to learn stuff. And that's really what the focus is for academic coaching. So how does this differ, academic coaching compared to tutoring? Well, much of it I've already mentioned, but specifically, academic coaching is broader based, long-term kind of support. We can apply academic coaching to all subject areas. Students we work with, they might not be doing very well in science, but they can also see that in other subjects that they're also starting to trend downward, that the weakness, if you're a weakness in an organization, it's likely going to affect all your subjects. And so our support, academic coaching support, is better applied to students who need help across subject areas. The great thing about our coaching is that it's done with the student in school, applying these skills to their current schoolwork. Trying to teach students outside of the school, outside of their own classroom, as if it's another course, can be demotivating for an adolescent student, and not see the application, which is often the great disconnect for students, what they do with what they get. Whereas applying these skills directly to their current schoolwork, they can see the skills in action. Plus, because we're working on skills, it's much like that saying, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. And it's a very similar, we're not just giving them the answers, we're not just telling them how to answer a single question, we're showing them how to learn. And because they can now take that skill and apply it today, tomorrow, and for the rest of their academic life, what we're giving students is a sense of control, right? It's not just luck. If I walk into a class and I happen to have a good teacher, I'll do well. Or if it's a subject that I happen to like, I'll do well. Or we'll eliminate that. Let's show you how to learn so you can be successful no matter what it is that you're learning in any environment. So again, the academic coaching philosophy is long-term and broad-based and more about giving the students control. Tutoring, and there is a role for tutoring, but it's short-term. It's really only only effective if it's for a very specific amount of information over a very short period of time. For example, if I'm in my later grades of high school and I'm doing well except in chemistry and I don't understand this unit very well, get a tutor, have them reteach that to you so you can then do well. Or if I have a specific test coming up that I want to do well on, a tutor might make sense there. However, again, for short-term periods of time where specific content is needed. Now, but to have a tutor ongoing all the time, it starts to undermine the effectiveness of that. And the reason being is you can create dependency. Right? If I start to believe as a student, if I start to believe that I only do well on science tests when I work with this tutor here because they can teach it to me better than my teacher. Well, that might be true for this particular test, but that's not going to be very helpful going forward. I'd want to know, why is it that I'm unable to learn this material? Why is it that I struggle to learn independently? Whereas a tutoring really just fills gaps. And it can create that dependency because, and we will all admit, that we would all learn better in a one-on-one environment. Of course we would. And so often that's why tutoring can be very effective in a short period of time, because it's a one-on-one attention that they're getting. Except that going forward throughout their academic career, that's not how learning takes place. A student needs to be able to learn in a larger forum, say at university or college or classroom, or be able to learn independently without other people's support. And that's the kind of skills that in the long run are going to benefit students. And as I said, I've worked with many students, families where they have 2, 3, 4, 5 tutors on the go, one for every subject. And that would be an indication that, hold on, it's not possible that I'm not doing very well in all these subjects, that there isn't some sort of commonality between them. And again, it's usually skill-based as opposed to all these different specifics that way. So there is a big distinction to be made between academic coaching and tutoring. Similarities in that we are working with current schoolwork and that we want to help the student improve both today, but academic coaching is built for the long term. Tutoring is built for the short term. So you're listening now and you're thinking, well, might it be appropriate for my son or daughter? Well, you have to ask these types of questions. If your son or daughter wants to improve their overall performances across subject areas in school, looking into an academic coach probably makes the most sense. If your son or daughter is disorganized and they have difficulty managing school and this is what's holding them back, an academic coach is likely what the best area to investigate. If you know that your son or daughter has been doing fine in school, but they're now finding school a little more tougher, their marks are dropping and they don't know why, and they're more than capable, that's usually the indication that they need to develop their skills, that the skills are not developing as time is going on and would benefit from a coach. Another area is my son or daughter stressed out? Are they struggling with anxiety, school-related anxiety? We see this often. And there's 2 areas that we really see this in. Those students who are disorganized or have difficulty planning, and they're always rushing around last minute, they're always putting out fires, they tend to be stressed and anxious about school. And of course, developing their organization and planning skills will be how to address that. But then we've also got this group of students over here who do exceptionally well in school. Their marks are fantastic, except it comes at a great price. They work way too hard to achieve those results. And so they're up all night, they're studying all the time, and they shouldn't have to be putting that much effort in to achieve those marks. And so if you have a grade 9 student who's working that hard to achieve those marks, well, that's not sustainable. And we as parents recognize when our son or daughter are engaged in behavior that are not sustainable. Yes, you're doing fine now, but what are you going to do next year when it's harder? Or the next year after that? Or what about when I go to university? You have to be more effective as a learner, efficient as a learner. We shouldn't be spending 3 hours working hard to accomplish something that should have taken half an hour. And these kinds of breakdowns that we see that often cause students stress and anxiety are areas and types of situations where an academic coach can be helpful. And those students, and if a student has been identified with an underlying learning challenge, which really means that they have a very specific diagnosed weakness that is undermining their ability to do well in school, and there's many different types, that is a student to which they require the development of skills and strategies to overcome that weakness. And of course, we are a good fit for that as well. So how about this coaching relationship? What makes it so special? Well, as was mentioned in my introduction, I'm in Canada, so I'm a hockey player and have been for many years and played competitive hockey through university. And then coached hockey, coached adolescents for quite a number of years at a high level as well, which is where this whole coaching model really began to come from, was what made the coach-athlete relationship special, and where do we get this resistance from the student-teacher relationship and the struggles there. And so there's a number of things about that. First of all, with the coaching relationship, one of the benefits is that we're not mom and dad and we're not the teacher. And my coaches are typically, someone who is a good communicator, who can take on a different type of relationship with a student, like a mentor, and where a student is not going to feel that initial need to be defensive or put up the walls or, not want to listen. They're more likely to be open with this person, especially if they have a good rapport. So that relationship is very important. And because it's one-on-one, a student feels like that they're being heard and it is their goals that they're trying to be achieved, not someone else's. And so it's this collaborative relationship that a coach and a student has, where the coach doesn't go in and say, this is what you need to do, this is what you should aspire to be, and this is how you do it. It is more, what is it you want to accomplish? And let's figure out a way to do that together. And for a student, that is a far more welcoming type of relationship that they're likely to engage in. And so every student is different. As mentioned, I've worked with hundreds. Through the years, we're into the thousands of students that StudySpot has worked with. And of course, all the breakdowns that I've been speaking to you about are pretty common, but each student is different. And every experience I've ever worked with a student is all completely different than the ones I've worked with before, because we're all so unique. And so it's that relationship, that unique relationship between a coach and a student who can work together collaboratively to figure out what's going to work best for this student. What works best for one might not work best for another. And it's important for us to have that kind of one-on-one relationship to, empower that student to be able to become the independent learner that they need to be. And again, when you go into working with a student, you say, what is it you want from this? It's a very powerful question to ask a student, because it's about who they are and what they want. And in most cases, students want to achieve what they're capable of achieving. And academic coaching can be a great step towards helping them achieve that. Thank you. I would, again, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you, to introduce the concept of academic coaching. I know we may have some questions more specific about it, which I'd be happy to answer. And hopefully that many of you have recognized that or made you think about the idea of another option when it comes to providing your son or daughter the support that they need.
John, this is Rahul. I was just wondering if you could also explain what a typical session would look like. If there is a difference between the first session and follow-up sessions, that kind of thing as well. Maybe if you could talk on that.
Yeah, hopefully this screen is a better one to use. You see me answering. Typical session. Yeah, again, all the relationships with coaches and students are unique. However, the structure of sessions are all very similar. Typically at the beginning of a session, the coach and student are going to talk about what's happened over the past week. It's something that often adolescent students don't do. They don't reflect. They don't think about what did I do last week and what can I do differently, or what can I do better? And so that's an opportunity in the coach-student relationship to discuss and to reflect on the week that's passed. How did that test go that we studied for? Hey, did you get your homework done this week? Hey, did you keep to the schedule that we created? Why? Okay, if not, then what can we do differently this week? And so after this initial reflection, then we talk about planning. What do we have going forward? What subjects do we have coming up? Let's go through each subject. What is it that we need to get done? Do you understand what's being asked of you? How long do you think that's going to take? And then put together a weekly plan that's going to allow a student to have and take into consideration their extracurricular activities and their own personal schedules so they know what can be done. And then based on what they have on the go, academically, they're going to work on a skill. Now, whether that be, studying for an upcoming test, planning their ideas for an essay they have to write, putting together the stages and a plan for completing a project, or maybe just reading and taking a set of notes from their science textbook. We're going to help them develop these larger base skills with and help them apply it to things they have to do in the short term. So the student sees the connection between what I do and the things I get. And then usually to wrap up a session, we ask, what is it that, what can we do differently? Oh, so what did we learn today? Why is that important? And how can we apply it going forward? So that kind of closes the loop on a session. So that's the structure of a typical session. Where that session goes each week might go in different directions, but over time, a student will get pretty good a sense of what it is they do.
I mean, would you also say that, I mean, in terms of the kind of students that get the most benefit out of this, would they be more the, typical creative types who are not very well organized and where the coach can help more than the other scenario?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's certainly a population of students, free thinkers, creative students, and so on, who might who struggle with structure. And those students are ideal for the students we work with. As I said, the academic world is not really like the real world necessarily. Being able to, get by with being creative and so on has a lot of opportunities in the world. But in school, it's pretty rigid. And that sometimes doesn't match up. So learning how to be organized, learning how to create structure, create a routine is of great importance academically. And so there's certainly a great number of students who can show their strengths in many different ways. And it takes many different make this world go around. Academically, however, it's a pretty tight little circle. So some students where that doesn't come naturally, by no fault of their own, will benefit from learning how to control and how to take on that that kind of behavior that may not come naturally.
I see a question on the chat as well coming up that talks about, how can it be beneficial or is it beneficial for college kids who are going on, to further degrees, and what do you have to say to that? I know several, leading universities have this program, but if you can talk on that for a minute.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, and it's a growing part of my own practice here is university students and college students, because they're not learning these skills in high school. They get to university, and university is a whole different experience. But let a student be successful in high school is no longer applicable in university. And that is a real shock to students making that transition from high school to college and universities. And so, of course, we work with students in college, university. The primary difference is that you're right. In many universities, they provide these kind of resources are available to them. And I often encouraging university students to pursue those as well. In high schools, there's very little of that kind of resource available, which is the gap that we fill. But having said that, even at the university level, some students are more comfortable with this kind of one-on-one coaching relationship that allows them to have, once again, a much more personalized experience than perhaps they have going into the learning strategies office or student support services at a university. So you're absolutely right. The skill sets are the same. The development is required, especially if they haven't developed these skills over their high school career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know if anyone else on the panel wanted to jump in. There was only
we know that with many of the students we work with, just as a talk about what that initial process looks like, there's questionnaires that are filled out so the parent can give us a good sense of their son or daughter, what their needs are. But it's important, as I said, it's important for the coach and student to establish that rapport. And so usually early on in the process, there's a questionnaire, executive skills questionnaire, an academic skills questionnaire that really starts for the student and the coach to get to know each other so that they can really identify where the breakdowns are taking place for a student. Learning is very simple, right? If you think of learning in the whole, information comes to us through reading, through lecture, through experiments, and then later they ask for the information back through exams, through presentations, through essays. That's it. Information in, information out. And students who struggle often think of, I don't do very well on tests, and they think of it as an output problem, or I can't get essays, my essays aren't very good. And they think of that as an output problem. And almost always it's an input problem. The way I'm taking my notes when I take in, the way I'm reading and identifying information, the length of time I'm studying before tests, or how I'm organizing my time and how I'm making a plan. All that is about how the information comes in, and it has a big impact on the way out. So these initial questionnaires with students, it gets the conversation for the student thinking about not just editing my essay, but how am I planning my thoughts before I even start to write? And so it gets them thinking about the kind of skills that we're going to be teaching as academic coach. So I often tell families that, after 2 or 3 sessions, a student should have a pretty good idea as to what it is that we're doing and how it differs from typical tutoring and why it's going to be valuable for them. And then, of course, later on in the process, down the road, they can go back to those questionnaires and reevaluate and see if they're improving in some of these matrices that were originally established.
So, John, one more thing, like we always say that academic coach helps students not just with their studies, but how to study effectively, right? So it's primarily having better ways of studying, managing your lifestyle, managing your things. So can you just give a couple of examples or some case studies which you can explain for the benefit of our students? Because while you have explained what is academic coach, how it helps, but a case study or an example would actually help all of us to understand better.
Yeah, exactly. I had a student who I was recently working with, and again, it was kind of like I was saying, that he just doesn't think he does well in tests. He freezes up. Oh, I went in the test and I got frozen and I didn't know what to do. And that's the problem I have. I have test anxiety. I've got, and so we have this phenomenon where many students feel like they know the information, they go into a test or exam, they sit down, they forget it all. An hour later, they stand back up, they walk out of the room, and they remember it all again. And they think, oh, I've got this psychological problem that when it comes to tests and exams, I just can't write them. And the reality is that they don't know how to study. They were never prepared. Too often, when students study passively, they familiarize themselves with information. So they look at it passively. They might have a topic to which they understand it. They can have a conversation about it. It makes sense to them, but that's not good enough for a test. And at some point, you have to test yourself. Practice writing the answers down that you're going to have to write come test time, so that you know whether you know something or not. And there's a big difference between passively knowing and understanding information and also being able to write answers out on a test. And that's the big difference between passive and active learning. And testing and retesting ourselves, creating summary notes, teaching others. There's many different ways for us to absorb and take in information that's going to prepare us to write a test, not just familiarize ourselves with the information, which is the primary breakdown for most students. So that'd be an example of where a student might see a disconnect between what they do and the results they get. I mean, on the I'll just continue on the organization front. And so students also sometimes have this perception that I work better under pressure. We hear that often all the time. No, I can't start that. It's not due until Monday. I have the whole weekend, and I just can't get started on it. I'll wait till Sunday night when I really have to get done. And they have this perception that they do better work when under pressure, and that's just not the case at all. They would have done much better had they started a week earlier. It just feels like they have to get it done, and so that sense of urgency is what drives their organization system, and it gives them the sense that they're accomplishing things when in reality they're not. They're not doing their best work. And so they need to learn that learning in smaller chunks over time is far, far more effective than trying to learn everything all at once. And it may seem obvious when we talk about it like this, but in the moment, it's a place where most students would benefit from. is having a plan.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, as you rightly said, it's actually a very thin line between learning and how to express yourself in the test. So many times we know that we have learned it, we know it, but when we write the exam, and that actually happens with a lot of people, that when we write the exams, we tend to forget a lot of stuff. So I think this is very important to know.
Yeah, well, the easiest thing to that, I tell like students will say, "Oh, I've studied." I said, "Well, how are you going to do on the test?" They'd say, "Well, I don't know." Well, so how can you not know? You should be testing yourself. It should never be a surprise what questions are going to be on a test. If I'm writing a science test or economics or geography or history, any subject like this, the questions that are going to be on the test should be pretty obvious. Or certainly by the time you get to high school, they should be pretty obvious, the kind of questions that are going to be asked. Then ask yourself ahead of time. Test yourself. See if you know it. Practice writing down your answers. You should have a pretty good sense of how you're going to do on a test before you go in. On math and science questions, obviously it's difficult to replicate the kind of questions, but you can do enough of those questions over and over and over again to give you a sense of whether I know how to do a question or I don't know how to do a question. So there are active ways in which to prepare yourself to write a test. So there shouldn't be surprises. And that in of itself is a skill. Because I told you this today doesn't mean tomorrow you're going to be an expert. It takes practice to anticipate questions, to test yourself, to figure out that whole process. But that is the line, the path that you want to be on with regards to improving as a student, as opposed to just going into every test and I hope I do well. That shouldn't be your approach to tests.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the earlier you start this, the better it is, because that helps in the long run. And be it any test, not just a school test, but any test, competitive exams, whatever. I think the attitude helps the way
Yeah.
you actually develop yourself.
Well, exactly. And the first exam you ever write, whether that be in grade 9 or in grade 7, or depending on what school or however it is, that first exam you ever write is not going to be your best. Right? It's just not. You will get better and better at it as time goes on, especially if you are approaching with the idea that I can get better at this. And if I practice and if I pay attention and I reflect on what I've done, I can get better at it. And so the more exams you write, the better you become at writing exams. And so if to think of it that way, as opposed to the thinking process where an exam is going to tell me how smart I am. And that's not what tests are for. It's not what exams are for. They're not there to tell you how smart you are. What exams and tests are there to know is how good a student you are. Were you able to take the time to learn this information? And can you articulate in an articulate manner, communicate it back to us and show us that you've learned it? That's what a test does. And that's a very different way of thinking than thinking of a test or exam as judging how smart you are. And that's a fundamental thing that a student needs to realize if they're going to be successful academically.
A question on the progress. How do you track the progress? I mean, when the coach starts working on day 1 to, let's say, 3 months down the road, any big goals or, weekly, or how do you go about that?
Certainly. So goal setting is a very interesting topic for this kind of work, because there are things that you have control over, and then there's things that you don't have control over. For example, if I'm a teacher of a class and I'm going to create a test for my class, I could create a test to which every student fails. I could do that, just make it really hard. It's within my power. I could also create a test which every student does really well on. Again, I create a really easy one. That's the power I have as a teacher. So if that's the case, it's difficult to hold a student accountable exactly for the mark that they get on any given test entirely, because some of it's outside their control. So how do we create a goal that is mark-based, because that's ultimately what we need to get, is good, how to get better marks and so on, but not hold them, but keep them within things that they can actually control. So the idea is that when you create a goal, a long-term goal, I want to be on a roll. I'd like an 85% average by the end of the school year. I want to get a 90 in science. I want to pass all my courses, whatever the goal might be. We want to establish that. But then we need to ask ourselves, what are the habits and strategies that I'm going to need to utilize to achieve that mark? So the goals might be getting my homework done every night, planning and studying ahead for my tests, I need to have a good routine at home so that I can stay on top of work. I need to have better notes and so that I can do better on tests and exams. So we start to identify the habits and behaviors in which a student has total control over. They have total control whether their notes are good or not. They've got total control whether or not they do their homework each night. Those are the things we really want to be able to focus on, not focused on whether I got an 80% on every one of my quizzes. That's going to be very difficult for a student to really feel a sense of control over. We want to set goals to which they have controls over that they have control over. And then over time, we can start to then evaluate, are we achieving to what we think we're capable of achieving? So the goal setting is very interesting, where we have an overriding goal, a mark that we want to achieve, getting into a school, whatever that is, a specific program. But then we have to identify what are the habits and behaviors that are required for me to be successful, and then focus on those on a daily basis. And that is going to be what the coach and student want to focus on, is what are these skills we need to develop, so that if we do those things, those marks will take care of themselves. So, I mean, going back to how evaluating, coaching is something you evaluate on an ongoing basis. For parents, we should start to see changes in those first couple months. They're doing their homework more consistently. They're feeling more confident in school. I see them doing this extra work. They enjoy the sessions. They find them very helpful. Those are all good signs that we're heading in the right direction in the short term. In the long term, you'd want to see some performance marks that reflect what they're capable of.
All right. Okay. Makes the parent's job a little easier when the kid is working with the coach.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the biggest compliments, the biggest comments we get from parents is they say, my relationship with my son or daughter is better. And the reason being is because there's somebody else now having these conversations with their son or daughter, they don't have to. And so they're not all, how it is with their kids, sometimes is that all conversations end up in the same place. They all end up talking about school. Did you get your homework done? Are you doing it? What are you done? What do you have coming up? Constantly knocking heads. And that doesn't do your relationship, very, very positively. So and so having somebody else who's asking those questions and working on those things allows a parent to take a step backwards from it and just engage your son or daughter without having those contentious topics to have to worry about. It happens often. My relationship with my son is better. He's happier. My daughter and I aren't as fighting about school as much anymore. I'm really happy that she's working with so-and-so because I know that they're doing some good work together. That kind of comment is quite common. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I think we're out of time almost. So.
Thank you, John. I think there is one more question. What to do if my exam score is not increasing? Maybe we can take one last question, as we are just done with the time.
Yeah. So your marks aren't getting better and you don't know why. You're working hard and so on. So that's a great thing too. The fact that you're asking that question is the right one. And as long as you can say, okay, you start to evaluate, what is it that I'm doing? And is there ways that I can do this better? What have I learned from these last exams? Is the way in which I'm studying impactful? And your marks aren't just going to go up just because. If you keep doing the same thing every time, your marks are going to reflect that they're probably going to stay the same. If they need to get better, then you probably need to be doing more effective things. And so asking the kinds of questions that I was just talking about, testing yourself ahead of time, using different active study strategies, then those are the ways in which you are going to see improvement, is if you are constantly evaluating what am I doing and trying to continue to replicate best practices going forward. And if those are the kind of questions you have, then maybe those are the questions for a coach to help with, is to help you go through your studying process to see where the breakdown is. Is the breakdown when I take notes? Is it what's happening in class? Is it what I'm doing at home? Is it what I'm doing a week before the test? Is it what I'm doing the night before a test? At some point along the way, there's a breakdown, and that would be something you would want to search through.
All right. Thank you, John. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you very much. And really, again, thank you all for the opportunity to speak to you, and look forward to answering any questions you may have down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, it was a very insightful session. It was great to know all of these details. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you.
So, dear students, we would now be starting our second session, which is on profile building by IIP. So we have David and Daniel from Tutoring, and they will be now taking it over and explaining you how profile building and why profile building is important. Thank you, David and Daniel, for joining us. Thank you so much. And over to you, please.
All righty, thank you so much. Thank you to John for what Danielle and I were able to see that was super informative and beneficial. I'm just bringing up our PowerPoint real quick. Are we all able to see this?
Yes, we are.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Awesome. So thank you guys so much for spending time with us tonight. Happy Friday. Danielle and I are here today to talk to you about building a stellar academic profile for your future university admissions. Today, we will be going a little bit back and forth, but we'll also be monitoring the chat function. So we'll try to pick up your questions and answer those at different points throughout our webinar tonight. And then we'll also leave a few minutes at the end so that we can address a few more questions. But we'll go ahead with a quick intro. My name is David. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Tutoring. I lead the IIP program here with Manya. I have a master's in computing and education from Columbia University and MBA from the MIT and Fudan University Collaborative Program. And we'll send it over to Danielle.
Hello, everyone. My name is Danielle, and I am the person that will be communicating with you most during the IIP program and just helping you answer any of your questions and make sure that your program with your mentor goes as smoothly as possible. I'm a current PhD candidate at Shanghai Jiao Tong University and also have my master's from Shanghai Jiao Tong University in public administration. So I also am currently in the process of writing papers and reports. So I'm a great person to ask if you are trying to get a paper published or anything like that. And I will go ahead and get started with giving you some general information about the Mentorship Program or IIP program. So first, and one of the most important things is that it's a one-on-one program. So what this means is that you can work directly with a university professor in an academic field of your interest, and you're not following some pre-made curriculum that is kind of made for lots of different students. Each session is specifically tailored to your wants and what you need to learn, and it's really designed to fit your interests perfectly because it is one-on-one. So it allows that kind of flexibility. And it really gives you a chance to not only expand and apply your knowledge in, a subject area that may not be possible in the school that you're currently going to, but it also helps you build upon any sort of knowledge base that you already have. And we currently work with over 105 professors, lecturers, or researchers from universities in the US and also in the United Kingdom. And during your IIP program, you will generally be working toward creating some sort of research project, or you may do a coding project if you're interested in computer science. David later will give you lots of awesome examples of things that students have done in the past. And then it also works great as an internship kind of program where you work directly with a professor in the field that you are interested in studying later. And then you can also create your own report, which you can then later submit for publishing, which is a fantastic addition to any sort of resume or university application in the future to show that you not only have that knowledge base, but you also have that experience. And you can also focus on a program that just gives you a deeper learning in an area that maybe you've always been interested in learning about, but never had the chance to. So these are just a very, very small section of some of our awesome mentors. As you can see, we have some amazing, amazing mentors in top universities in the US and also in the UK, and in a huge range of programs. Literally cannot think of a program that we don't have a mentor that at least has experience in that general area. So if you ever have any specific questions, please do reach out to us and we will be happy to suggest professors that will more closely fit with your area of study. So here we just see a few. So, we have engineering and computer sciences, finance, aerospace engineering, biomedical engineering, and statistics. But this is just a very, very small section. We also have tons of mentors in, the arts, more in depth like computer sciences. Just do reach out if you have any areas of interest and you want to see if we have mentors for them. We probably do.
That's a really great point, Danielle. I'm looking at this right now and I'm saying, wow, we are really focusing on the STEM students here.
Yes.
Like Danielle
Yes.
said, we work with 108 different professors and researchers, and not just in STEM fields. Of course, we have amazing people for those, but also for business, economics, entrepreneurship, marketing, humanities, social sciences, fine arts, music composition, film, all sorts of great things. In fact, I think we have a slide here where we list a few of those options. So we'll talk about it.
Yes. And I see a question about a food tech field. Do send us an email and we'll be able to give you more specific examples of professors that have experience in that kind of area. And then next up, these are just some of the top universities that our professors, lecturers, or postdoctoral researchers come from, and many, many, many more. And so if you have your eyes set on a university that you want to study at, or you just want to be able to have experience working with a professor at one of these top universities, this is a great experience to get that experience, and also to work with a professor that may be at a university that you are looking to apply to in the future.
Absolutely. And I did just want to add for Anant, we do have a great professor in food tech. He's actually a professor in both mechanical engineering and food tech agriculture. He runs his own agriculture business as well. So yeah, we can talk more about that, Anant, if you want to schedule an evaluation.
Yes. So these are our most popular mentorship fields. Like David mentioned, the professors we had earlier were mostly in the STEM categories, but we definitely have a ton of mentors also in the humanities and social sciences fields, and even in fine arts. So like I've mentioned, don't hesitate to reach out and ask us if you have any specific interests, because we likely do have some great fits.
And I am seeing a couple of questions now, so I'll just address this real quick about how to join IIP. That's on the last slide, so we'll talk about it in a little bit. But basically, what you want to do is reach out to your sort of support at Manya, your local Manya center, and then they will get in touch with us, and we will schedule an evaluation where we'll learn more about you, assess your fit for this program, and then ultimately recommend who from our team of professors you should work with. But back to you, Danielle.
So IIP is a part of like online extracurricular enhancement. So not only can you take online courses from top universities or even participate in online competitions, what David and I work with most is the Collegiate Mentorship Program. And this is, like I mentioned earlier, where you work one-on-one with a professor remotely. So all of this that I have mentioned so far is all online. And it's generally a 8-week program, and you'll have about an hour session per week for 8 weeks. That doesn't mean that you will only put in 8 hours of work. It is, it does require a lot of work, and it is quite demanding because you do want to do amazing work and to show your mentor that you are an incredible student, to hopefully later be able to ask for a letter of recommendation. So With that being said, all of this can be done online, which is amazing. So you don't have to actually travel to the US to get started with your US study process. And again, just a reminder, these are all the fields that you can go into. All right, and so like I mentioned earlier, here's the general overview of how the program works. And so in the 2-month program, they're generally held through video chat sessions. And then you are also welcome to communicate with your mentor by email in between your sessions. So your communication won't stop as soon as the session is finished. And then you can do the sessions from anywhere in the world. Generally, they're held on Zoom or Skype. And so it's easy access for everybody. And like mentioned before, they're about 1 hour each. And if you ever need any support, you can reach out to your program coordinator, which may be me or someone else on our team. And we're always happy to help you at any time and help you really get the most out of your mentorship program.
Just got an interesting question from a student who's asking, they are intending to go to college primarily focusing on the sport that they play, which is golf. So the student wants to take business studies as a major and then balance it with golfing. So they're wondering for IIP, what kind of thing could I do? Could I join it with a sports expert? I think to answer your question, Asita, that would be, if you're planning to major in business, the best way that we could support you with IIP is to set you up with a professor in a business field. And we work with professors in business administration, finance, economics, marketing, entrepreneurship, and more. So that would be the kind of academic area that you would want to show your abilities in for your application. There is also of course, a sports recruitment process if you're looking to play on a varsity team for a university. So that's something that you would probably want to discuss with a sports recruitment specialist. That would be aside from IIP. Of course, we're focused on more the academics than the sports.
And so there are 3 primary types of the mentorship. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier. So there's the independent research project. This is where you will work on a specific project with your mentor. So like if you are really interested in sports and also business, you could try to work with your mentor to create some sort of like PGA plan in regard, so you can kind of tie them together. And then also, when you're doing your independent research, you'll be able to really tie in what you're learning at school and then advance it during your mentorship with that very like expert opinion on what you're doing and to help like refine your idea. And so here's an example of like an independent research project. So you could work with a professor of economics at UPenn, and then you can study the economic impact of COVID-19 on migrant workers in Asia, and then create a research paper and then publish it. This is a real example. This student was really, really amazing, and David will also give you more case studies here in a second.
Yeah, that is a real student. We actually just found out he got into NYU and UC Irvine, which is amazing. But yeah, he worked with Dr. Kempthorne, who you saw on the earlier slide. I do see another couple of questions. What is PGA? That's the Professional Golf Association in the US. There's a question about college recruitment for cricket. I don't believe there are cricket teams in the US for collegiate sports. But you may want to look into that further, and perhaps we can look that up after the webinar. But back to you, Danielle.
Yes, and so then the other track that you can take, which is not as popular, but we have had a few students do this. This is where you work as an assistant or a collaborator on one of your mentor's current project. This is only possible with select mentors, and you would have to have very like specific interests that match very well with your mentor. But if this is something that you really, really want to do, we're happy to help you figure out the best way to pursue this. So one example would be to work with a professor of psychology on a university study of the impact of solitary confinement on mental health of incarcerated individuals. So very, very interesting. And then the next one, this is possibly one of the more popular ones. This is where you learn from your mentor to increase your knowledge set and level of expertise within a subject that you're very passionate about, but haven't had a chance to learn yet. We see this a lot with the engineering topics because it's especially hard to get engineering education in high school. And so we get a lot of students that pursue the deeper learning path, especially in the STEM programs, but also in all of them. So an example that's not a STEM example is to work with a professor of film to study mid-20th century war dramas and incorporate this knowledge into a screenplay for a film created by a student-led group. This is also a real example and was amazing and just super interesting to follow. And so anyone that gets to do a project like this to really build on their knowledge set will be very lucky.
And the example there kind of ties in with a question that we just received about what are the best programs to pursue for a master's in like media and communication. To my knowledge, well, of course you can look at some of the top business graduate business schools in the US, and they'll have phenomenal programs likely in those areas as well. But also I believe USC and Boston University are a couple of the top ones in that area. Another question is there an internship, or is an internship a must for the college application? It's certainly not a requirement. You don't have to have one to apply to universities. But what this does is an internship helps students set themselves apart when you're applying for very selective elite universities, because as you can imagine, 90% of the students who are applying to those type of schools have good enough grades to get in, but maybe the 5 to 10% who actually do are the students who have profound achievement outside of the classroom. And that's where an internship really helps. And then, yeah, okay, great. So we'll move on to the next slide.
All right, next, just to give you some idea of some projects and internships that some of our students have done in the past. So David will give you some specific projects in the case studies, which are very, very awesome. I think you'll be very excited to hear about those. But first, here are some popular journals for the IIP student publication. So we've had students that have submitted and even gotten published in journals such as Journeys, Exploratio, Questions, Journal of Student Research, International Journal of High School Research, and Journal of Young Investors. And so all of these are great opportunities for students to be able to finally get their research published, which looks amazing on any sort of application that you might do in the future. And it really, really helps set you apart, especially if you're applying for a bachelor's program or if you're applying as a transfer student or technically at any level, to really set your application apart from the other students that are applying, since it is quite difficult to get published. And these are all examples of youth journals. So you are able to publish to them as a high school or an undergraduate student. So it's a great opportunity to just get in on publications very early on, as that's very often a question on all college admissions applications from undergraduate to master's to PhD is, have you been published, and to submit the information to your publication.
Wonderful. Thanks, Danielle. And that is, let's just go back to the publications for a second. This is an amazing way for students to prove that you have had an extraordinary achievement, right? Anyone can say that they've done something, and oftentimes people say a little more than they should about something that they maybe didn't do in an application. So this is a way to have concrete proof that what you did really was outstanding. And I do see one other question back to the sporting, can I use my sporting interest in place of an internship to make me stand out? That's a challenge because when you're applying to a university, you're not applying to major in golf or to major in basketball, right? You're majoring in an academic field, and that's ultimately what admissions offices are admitting you for. Aside from the very rare instance of a student being recruited and admitted kind of based on their sports recruitment. So what an internship does in terms of the academic, in terms of the benefit it can give you towards your academic profile would really be the way that you would want to stand out. But let's move on now. Danielle, feel free to jump in or cut me off at any point if we have any questions. But I think we have 4 case studies of students who have gone through IIP that we want to share for you in different subjects, just so that you can get a sense of what students do. And hopefully this can give you a little bit of inspiration for what you might want to do in this kind of 2-month research opportunity with a professor. So this first one, this was one of our very talented students recently who was from Asia, went to an international school, he has a passion for electrical and mechanical engineering. And we set him up with one of our professors at Columbia University in mechanical engineering, who is also on the leadership team of Pratt & Whitney, one of the world's largest aeronautics manufacturers. Together, they worked on, as you can see in 1 through 4 here, actually building this really cool, kind of ugly looking, but really amazing waterproof electrical headset for analyzing swimming performance. So a swimmer can wear this and it will tell your kind of analytics, your speed, your stroke, and a bunch more data that they also coded software to receive from the device. They actually ended up getting multiple patents for their creation. And then the student also submitted his work to a design conference in Manchester in the UK, which was accepted. The student was published through that and was able to actually present his work there, including both his technology as well as kind of a market comparison between his device and then other sports athletic devices on the market, like your Fitbit or Apple Watch. So this was an incredible student. Again, multiple patents, research paper, developed a device. He actually even started selling this device to other schools in his area. So it turned into a business for him. But as you can imagine, he was a remarkable student. And he ended up getting a full scholarship from the University of Chicago. But I think didn't make his parents super happy. He ended up choosing Caltech instead of taking that scholarship, which of course Caltech is, maybe the top school in the US or the world for those fields. So he's very happy, but and we're very happy for him. Do we get any other questions in there, Danielle?
Not yet.
All right, come on, guys. And then why don't we take a look at case study number 2. So this is a student from Asia who's studying at an international school in the US in the Northeast. So she came to us, we had our IIP evaluation, and she had 2 main interests. One was for civil and structural engineering, and the other was for economics, which actually has a lot of crossover or relationship. So we were able to come up with a really interesting IIP project idea for her, which was to look at the materials and structures and designs for building homes especially in developing countries where there are a lot of limitations on what can be built given the the amount of money that they may have to construct it, as well as other important factors like durability compared dealing with what the environmental factors or weather might be in that area. So you can see a little bit of their initial plan here. So they were looking at the purpose of civil structures, different architectural phases of a project. So things like conceptual design, consideration of space and layouts, and then things like determination of load. So they're looking at how durable these designs and these materials will be in a specific area that might have high winds or earthquakes or other natural disasters that they might be coming up against. So another little bit of a meeting summary, one of the kind of post-meeting tasks that professors send after each session, but they're looking at things like more about the design and the materials that are going into different builds. So beams and columns, cross sections, types of beams, and how these different designs can allow for certain types of stress. And then you can take a look here at a little bit more of looking into how much wind pressure can be kind of levied onto a building. That was where they had some really interesting discussion. And you can see here a little bit more looking at structural characteristics, modes of vibration, how much different structural frames can bend given certain forces. So what did they do with all of this information? They did something really cool, actually together. So I should mention this student is working with Dr. Gonzalo Pita, who's done at least one of our IIP webinars with us before. But Dr. Pita is a professor of civil engineering at Johns Hopkins, JHU. So together with all of this knowledge that they were researching, they actually applied this to a website that the two of them created together. And that website details their project. Now, ultimately, the project or the focus that this student took on was about how to build and how to improve structures in the Dominican Republic so that they are able to stand up to the test of time and weather, but also be built affordably given the economic limitations that would be in that area, which, this is in the Caribbean where they're very prone to, as you can see on the right, things like hurricanes, volcano activity, potentially high waves, tsunamis. So these are all different risk factors that they were analyzing. And you can see that in the risk management framework here, looking at the concentration of different types of buildings throughout the island, how vulnerable these structures happen to be. And then ultimately, what are their recommendations for what types of designs and structures can be built at different price levels? And then what can be done to existing structures, right? Because we can't just, tear everything down and rebuild the world. But most importantly, how can we affordably sort of shore up the structures that are already in place? So actually, the student did such an amazing job, as you can see. Dr. Pita wrote her a phenomenal letter of recommendation for her universities. And we actually just found out that she was accepted to UC San Diego, which is amazing. Top 35 school in the US, which is just phenomenal. And I'll pause for just a moment. Do we have anything, Danielle?
No, just asking about program costs. And I copied the phone number for Mania and also their email. For any information for an exact quote for the program, please contact them.
Perfect, thank you. Two more case studies, I believe. And this one is an incredible student who is also at an international school here in Asia. She had a passion for both mathematics and economics. So we set her up with, conveniently, a professor in economics and statistics and financial mathematics, Dr. Peter Kempthorne from MIT. Dr. Kempthorne is one of the most renowned, amazing professors on our team. He's been with us for about 2.5 years. And he's done just incredible work with so many of our students. But this one in particular was a student who had a lot of experience in real estate. And she had been working in real estate with her parents, but she wanted to do a project analyzing the right time intervals to invest in real estate in different parts of the world. So Dr. Kempthorne helped her learn how to use our programming language in RStudio and apply that to her analysis. And you're taking a look, I think, here at a little bit of her final evaluation. So this is something that professors comprehensively fill out at the midpoint and at the end of IIP. And you'll see she had incredible marks and great feedback from the professor in terms of communication, work ethic, meeting expectations, attitude. And there's also a lot in here about where you can improve. And this is a bit of an analysis of students' abilities and characteristics across a number of different factors. So obviously this student was definitely meeting those expectations for Dr. Kempthorne, and that led to him, also being thrilled to write her a letter of recommendation for her applications. And I'll show you, I think, a little bit of her research paper here. So a lot of these graphs were done through RStudio so that she could actually kind of map out the right time intervals for investing in specifically California real estate. And I should mention, this paper was published in Exploratio Journal. So that was really cool. So she has a nice kind of tangible piece to prove her achievement. And you're looking at a little more analysis now, but she was ultimately accepted to, and she's now enrolled at NYU Stern, which is the #2 undergraduate business school in America, which has a 7.6% acceptance rate, which is just unreal. So we're super, super happy for her. Obviously, she's a high achiever, and she'll do amazing things in the future. One more student I wanted to share, oh, go ahead, Danielle.
Yes, just to answer a quick question about what would be the ideal grade to join the program. You could actually apply with any grades. Most of our students are generally top of their class though, or at least have a 3.5 and above. But don't let that stop you from applying. You'll be able to do an evaluation, actually more likely with David, and then he'll decide if the program will be a good fit for you, irrespective of your grades. But in order to be competitive, to be selected for the program, do make sure you have at least like a 3.5 and above, but you can apply no matter what.
That's exactly right. Yeah, we're doing a little bit more of a subjective analysis in those IIP evaluations, where we're essentially trying to get a sense of how well will you work with an elite university professor in terms of your communication skills, your commitment, your expertise, and a little bit more. So we'll work all that out. Just feel free to schedule an evaluation. So this is our last case study. This is a student who is from Asia, but is currently at her university in the US, and she was applying for master's programs. So she had a passion for music composition, and we set her up for IIP with one of our amazing professors of music composition from the top, or one of the top music schools in the United States, Berklee College of Music, Dr. Aversa. So together, they were able to do something really unique. Now, Danielle mentioned that most of our students work on a project together with their professor, and then they, in tandem with that project, work on their research paper. Now, for a student in music composition, sometimes in film, even sometimes in computer science, that can be a little bit different. And that was the case for this student, because they were working together on composing music. So their final written component was, in fact, music scores that were used to kind of help the students' application portfolio for graduate programs in music composition. So you're taking a look at a little bit about what their initial plan was, which was to actually together create 3 new songs, incorporating melodies, harmonies, counterpoint, matching lyrics with melodies, integrating different instruments and more. So that's a really high goal. This is an example of Dr. Aversa working with this student on her music score. So she's talking about how she was improving that, composite rhythm, predominant chord progressions, pedal tone. So this is just a little bit of a look at the score. And I think this is choosing an accompaniment texture to your melody. So adding even more in-depth content into this composition. And ultimately they were able to put together those pieces, and the student was able to add those into her portfolio and submit that with her application. This student also received an amazing letter of recommendation from her professor, which was, I would say, quite integral to her admissions plan in addition to that portfolio. And she ended up getting accepted to, pretty recently, NYU Steinhardt, which is one of the top graduate programs for music in the United States. So we're absolutely thrilled for her. And I know she's excited too. So yes, Danielle, I'll take a quick pause. Is there anything else in the questions?
Nope, no new questions.
Awesome. So when students, a really common question that students ask Danielle and I is, what can I get out of IIP? And I think there's two different sides to that. There's the educational goals or benefits, which are very intuitive. You're able to go much more deeply into the subject that you're most passionate about than you are able to in the context of your school or your local opportunities. But from an admissions perspective, there are 4 different ways that this is a real benefit. So when you're applying to university or graduate school, you will be filling out an activities list or resume. And students use IIP as a high priority piece in one or the other. So, most of our students would list this as, I was a research intern for Dr. Peter Kempthorne at MIT, and this is what I was able to achieve. And in fact, we were published here, which is really incredible for an admissions office to be able to see for a student. Other ways that this is beneficial, one is essay content. So in applications, there's usually supplemental essays saying, talk about how you've explored your subject of interest outside the classroom, or talk about a challenge that's that you've encountered in different research. So these types of questions would be very well answered by experiences that you've had in IIP for sure, and many students have done that. We've already mentioned the final written component, which comes in the form of a research paper. And like we've mentioned, most of our students submit that and have that published in one of several youth academic journals. And then also a letter of recommendation. And this is at the mentor or at the professor's discretion, as it would be in any work experience or internship. But every student who's successfully completed the program and met the expectations of their professor and asked for one has received a great letter. So if you work hard, you're in a great position for that as well. And the value of IIP. So we have to understand that this is just one piece in the holistic admissions process to universities and graduate programs. Of course, you have your essays, your grades, your test scores, your interviews, and so much more. But this is an integral part, and it can help students set themselves apart and make a great difference. And it has done that for many of our students, as you see below, who have been accepted to some of the top universities in the US, as well as the UK. All right. And go ahead.
So the question is, during which period of the year will the IIP be available or be available throughout? It is available at all times. And because it is a one-on-one program, we can tailor the start date toward your academic schedule or your goals, or maybe even your admissions goals. So that way, just let us know and we'll be able to get you started at any time throughout the whole year.
Absolutely. Yeah, more of our students tend to get started during the summertime or at the beginning of the fall semester or right around winter break when they have a little bit of time off from school. But like Danielle said, all year round, and we're very carefully tracking our professors' availability and capacity so we know when they would be available to work with you. So you just let us know when is the ideal time for you. But within this program, 2 more things. Students are able to not only collaborate with, one-on-one with so much exposure to elite university professors, lecturers, or postdoctoral researchers, but also what you're really doing here is you're reassuring, you're giving confidence to those selective university admissions officers that you are who you say you are, right? You are truly able to excel in that elite Western education environment. Why? Because you've done extremely well in a one-on-one research opportunity with a professor who regularly teaches that same outstanding caliber of student. So that's what this program is really all about. And that concludes our webinar, but I'll jump back in and maybe give students here a moment if they want to add in a few more questions. And I think we have just maybe 3 or 4 more minutes as well. So anything that you have to ask Danielle and I, feel free to send away.
So we just had a question about, is it only limited to students or even people who have graduated and quit their jobs? It is open to everybody. The vast majority of our students are high school students, like 11th and 12th grade students, but we also have a large amount of students that are wanting to transfer. And we've even had professionals in the field that have already graduated, maybe with an undergraduate degree, and they want to advance their understanding in a specific area. These tend to be business professionals or people who want to advance their knowledge in statistics. But yeah, so anybody can apply for the program and participate.
Absolutely. Yeah, like Danielle said, most of our students are either currently in high school or in college, but we have worked with some amazing young professionals who were either preparing for perhaps a PhD or just looking to further advance in their careers and take on another kind of more advanced opportunity. So this can definitely be that opportunity for you as well. Next question is, how early should I apply to a university? That might be a question that's better answered by admissions consultants, but we can give you a little bit of clarification there. For US universities, typically deadlines are for early decision, I think it's November 1st, for a rare couple of schools, maybe October 15th, and then your regular decision deadlines, or ED2, I think are January 1st. So you want to make sure that you have everything perfect long before then.
So is a research paper one of the main factors in an application to admit? Not necessarily, because most students do not have research papers, especially research papers that are published. I previously worked in admissions, and it was very, very rare to see this, which means if you have it, your application stands out. So in a way, it is a main factor in the sense that it really, really makes your application outstanding. But you wouldn't be denied admissions if you don't have the research paper. But if you're able to do this and add that to your application, it'll be a massive, massive advantage.
No doubt. And it's, I did want to just answer one quick thing here. So in addition to that, for the research paper being one of the main factors in an application to admit, I forgot to add one new slide to our PowerPoint tonight, which is something that's directly from the Common Application. If you're applying to certain specific schools, like Columbia, for example, they have what's called a research supplement. So they have a whole separate section in the Common Application where you can put in what type of research did you conduct with a professor at a university. So that's exactly where you would be able to put in your IIP experience. And not every school has that, of course, but for those that do, this can be a great benefit. And of course, for those that don't, that's where you're putting this into your activities list or resume.
And also, if later you apply for master's or PhD, you will have to put publications and research papers in the past. And so it's a good way to set you up long-term as well.
And this is a great opportunity for postgraduate students, definitely. Suprabha, I would recommend that you schedule an evaluation with us. And also for Anant, asking about sending the professor information, why don't you have a quick conversation with us in an evaluation too? What we do at that point is, at the end of that call, I will recommend typically 3, sometimes even 4 or 5 of our professors for you to consider, and we'll share, their faculty page, their courses, their past and current research, so that you can take a look at all of them and see who inspires you most. But they would, of course, all be very relevant to your main academic interest.
And for the question about what you'll be evaluated on during the assessment, like David mentioned earlier, we're mostly just looking to see if you would be able to succeed working with a professor of a US or a UK university. So we're looking at communication skills, we're looking at your passion for the subject. We're also looking at what kind of experience you've had in the past, if you want to do a specific research project, things like that. So it's definitely a lot more than just grades or test scores. It's really looking at how you present yourself. So that way you'll be able to have a good experience with the mentor.
And another question about sending, should you send a personal email to both of us or to the general email? You'll want to reach out to your contact at Manya, and you can see a phone number and email address here that you can certainly use to do that. And then they will get you in touch with us for that initial evaluation. All right, folks, and I think we've just gone over our time. So if you do have any other questions, please reach out to the Manya team, and we'd love to have that initial call with you. But thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and thank you to Danielle as well.
Hi, guys. It was great talking to you, and I hope to hear from you soon.
And thank you so much to the Manya team and to Anusha. Hope everyone has a great evening.